Over to you,
Okay.
Klaus-Peter.
Yeah, thank you, Larissa. I hope you can hear me okay. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. As you mentioned, my name is Klaus-Peter Sauer. I work on the product management side of the house in SAP for focusing on business data cloud, now coming from my Datasphere background, and as the products have a close linkage to each other, we thought as a follow-up, as Larissa said, from the very successful May webinar, which we offered, to now have a closer look into the Datasphere part of Business Data Cloud. And yeah, let's directly jump into it. And if we look at the agenda, I prepared a few things here. First of all, looking again at Business Data Cloud on a high level, but also maybe highlighting, since it's more than half a year now already, since we last had the other session, what has changed, what was enhanced, what is new on the Business Data Cloud side, and then of course going into the topic of today, looking deeper into Datasphere, right? So what Datasphere is, what it provides, what kind of components you will find as part of Datasphere and how they can be used, and then bring both together again, right? So what does Datasphere mean then in the context now of Business Data Cloud? What kind of newer concepts which we introduce with Business Data Cloud we can leverage also with Datasphere, or make better use out of Datasphere with these new kind of opportunities. And then at the end, let's have a look forward into next year, what we plan on delivering, what is our key focus on the one hand side for Datasphere, but also of course for Business Data Cloud. So let's have a look at the first part, right? And what is Business Data Cloud? And if you look at our overall portfolio at SAP, you really find it at the center of our overall portfolio. So in the middle, in that darker blue circular area in the middle, on top of the business technology platform, which is our basic technology stack, where we're also using many services in Business Data Cloud, and use this as a really central point of our strategy, surrounded by our key applications. Of course, first and foremost, our cloud ERP solution with S/4HANA, with all the different line of business-specific application areas, which we have on top of it, our industry-specific extensions and solutions. And of course, as AI is on everyone's mind and also in our strategy, a core piece, you find surrounding it in the purple area here, Joule, and the different agents specialized on these different LOB solutions. So Business Data Cloud is really at the heart and center of our strategy and of our portfolio. And why is that? So the applications which we provide from an SAP perspective, they generate a lot of super valuable data, right? So that data is really important to feed that into all the different AI mechanisms or projects you will be having in order to provide valuable outcomes out of it, right? So this business data, which is generated by the different applications, might it be finance in S4 or HR with success factors, procurement in Ariba, and the other solutions which we offer, right? All of those provide very, very valuable data sets, which we can feed into those AI toolings. And of course, AI itself generates new data, which should then flow back into the applications to enrich the applications and the outcome of the different processes within the applications there, so that we get somehow this kind of flywheel effect, what we're calling this, right? So one feeds into the other to create a bigger benefit at the end for all of these areas, not just for the applications, but also for the AI mechanisms. So that is really a key piece of where we see Business Data Cloud, because Business Data Cloud brings together the data from the variety of applications which we have. And how is it managed? So if we look a level deeper, right? You see on the bottom these SAP applications I was talking about, right? They might be sitting in different clouds or in different deployments. On top of it, you see Business Data Cloud surrounded with this purple box. And on the bottom layer there, you find the two terms data products and harmonized data models. I will look into this a little more detailed later on, but the basic idea is to bring data out of these core applications, what you find underneath, in harmonized data products and provide them in a way which we call data products to other applications, to other consuming applications, what we call on top of it intelligent applications. Might be applications for analytics or planning or simulations, might be specifically developed applications for you, where you have custom built applications, maybe on CAP technology with the business transformation, with the BTP platform, or it might be specific partner applications which can leverage then these kind of data products as part of an overall solution, which we call here Business Data Cloud. In the middle layer, you see that term Business Data Fabric, and that's where I want to go into a little more detail now on this next slide. So the surrounding pieces on top and on the bottom stay the same, but you see now different solutions as part of this Business Data Fabric, right? So on the left-hand side, if we start there, you see Datasphere, which is the core piece for providing semantics on top of the pure data, which is generated by these applications. You also find solutions like Analytics Cloud or Business Warehouse, also solutions which we had before Business Data Cloud came around. So you can bring those solutions as part of Business Data Cloud the same way as Datasphere with you and extend working with them. But more to the right-hand side, you also find new aspects. One of them is SAP Databricks. So we started a strong partnership earlier this year before the launch of Business Data Cloud in February, and the final GA version of it coming in May at Sapphire, at our key event there, to work together in this area, specifically providing SAP data for data engineering projects, for AI, machine learning, data science projects, which often happen in Databricks solutions, right? As part of the overall Business Data Cloud solution. This can happen as an integral part, which would then be called SAP Databricks, or it could also happen in the meantime with existing Databricks solutions some customers already have. So they can bring in these brownfield Databricks solutions and then connect it via a connectivity we call Business Data Cloud Connect service. So similar on the right-hand side, we just introduced at our key event in Berlin, SAP Tech Ed, a new partnership here with Snowflake in a similar way, not exactly the same, but in a similar way, where we will provide next year. So at TechEd, this was the announcement. The engineering teams are currently working on implementing this in a similar way to Databricks, like the offering of an SAP Snowflake as a solution extension to Business Data Cloud, but also in a similar way then for existing Snowflake implementations that they can be brought in via the BDC Connect service, similar to what I just was talking about with the brownfield Databricks. And of course, last but not least, AI Foundation, which is our core foundational AI service as part of Business Data Cloud, is here one of the key components of this Business Data Fabric. And for BDC, I want to leave it at this for the moment, right? Later on, after I talked more in depth about the Datasphere and its capabilities, we will bring both together and see how both solutions benefit from each other, because really Datasphere is one of the key and core parts of Business Data Cloud. But let's have a closer look at this. So what is Datasphere? if you take the picture, the illustration we just looked at, right, and look a little more closely into this business semantic Datasphere box, you find a lot of different capabilities there next to these other solutions we saw on the right-hand side. And if we look at the component overview overall of Datasphere, you find, again, different components, different capabilities as part of Datasphere. If we also start here from the bottom upwards, you see connectivity as one of a very broad capability which we have in Datasphere to be able to connect to various external systems. So that could be, of course, SAP applications on-prem as well as cloud-based applications, older technologies with SAP ECC or ERP, as well as, of course, the latest S4HANA Cloud or S4HANA on-prem solutions are connected there, as well as also a lot of other external sources not coming from SAP, meaning, for example, hyperscaler storage systems, right? So like Amazon S3 or Google Cloud Storage and others can be directly connected here via this connectivity piece. On top of it, maybe I just get myself a little laser pointer so you see where I'm at. So at this kind of layer here, you find different ways on how we make use of this kind of connectivity we have to external systems. So it could be data federation. We have capabilities in there to replicate data into Datasphere, but also transform it. And I will go in a couple of minutes a little deeper into these capabilities. On top of that, you see a central piece here, which is called space management. And I will also talk about this in a more detail just directly after I finalized talking about this slide here. Next to getting connectivity to data and bringing in data, semantics is, of course, a big topic with Datasphere, right? So bringing in just some fields with some data types is one thing, but understanding the meaning of a certain integer value, that it is really a measure or might be a currency which is attached to it. It might some data might represent like profit centers and your hierarchy you might have within your finance system, etc. So these kind of semantics is very important to understand, and that's where we have a specific functionality we call semantic onboarding, where we can really bring this in and bring this kind of semantical information over into the Datasphere solution. We can, of course, further model the data, right? We have various capabilities there. Then, of course, we have a cataloging solution. We have brought in very early on, or 5 years ago, a data marketplace capability. There is, of course, administration and security capabilities in there. And we also provide APIs on a variety of levels, right? So on the one hand side, we provide APIs to bring data in and to be able to connect to data, but also on the external side, what you see here on top with external consumptions, where we provide APIs to be able to consume data, which sits or is modeled as part of Datasphere. And what you see here as mentioned as CLI, this is a command line interface where you can programmatically interact with the system from your external ways. Okay, on top of it, you see analytics. So we're very closely integrated together with SAP Analytics Cloud, the analytics as well as the planning pieces in there. And on the right-hand side, I was talking about partnerships with Databricks and Snowflake just now. So we started the partnership with Databricks already back in the days with Datasphere a couple of years ago, and also others, but I don't want to go into details on all of these partnerships. So let's have a closer look at Datasphere and what kind of capabilities we can provide as part of the solution. So in Datasphere, when you start with an empty system, it all really starts with a space in Datasphere. That's the first thing you create. It's usually created by an administrator, and that administrator can make certain settings on these spaces. And then once a space is set up, the members, so the people who are part of that space, can start acquiring data, preparing data, model data, and make it available for consumption. So there are multiple dimensions of what we can do with a space and what can be defined. So on the one hand side, more the technical aspects of it, I can assign as an administrator resources, meaning certain amount of storage, memory. I can define workloads as part of the space management. I also can define the kind of storage type I want to use for these spaces. So the standard definition, if you create a space, is a space based on HANA, meaning then you have the persistency as part of the HANA database, as well as the runtime as part of the HANA database. But you can also make a choice for an object store type, which then uses HANA Data Lake files and the underlying hyperscaler file storage system. And on the compute side, you will then get Apache Spark as a compute runtime. So this is very technical aspect to it, but also important to mention that we have flexibility here. The same flexibility we have also on the compute runtime, meaning that when you make that decision in the first place, if you want to use HANA or object store file-based storage, you get the runtime accordingly. And on top of the runtime, you can also create elastic compute nodes, meaning you can spin up compute capacity for certain peaks you might have in consumption. So think about your maybe typical Monday morning scenario when the controllers come in and check the data from the previous weeks around sales, etc., how everything was going, or month-end closing is a typical setup where you probably need more than average resources, right? And elastic compute nodes can provide that. You can spin them up for a specific time to provide additional compute resources. And if you don't need them any longer, you can also shut them down again. You can schedule it, of course, if there's something regular coming up, and therefore leverage the capacity on the compute side in a very elastic or dynamic way. Last but not least, what you see here is a recycle bin capability, which we introduced some time back, which is very neat. If someone accidentally deleted a space and that was really an accident, and when you want to have it back, including of course all the data and the models in such a space, right? We offer that kind of capability now that you can really recover. And if you're sure, if you want to delete something, of course, you can then empty also the recycle bin, similar like you used it maybe from your operating system on your laptops or similar things. On the other hand, there are different capabilities you can have as part of a space. And one I was already touching with the users. So you can, as an administrator, define who is able to work with a certain space. So you can invite really members to a space, assign them there, and then they have access to it. And you can also restrict the level of access if they should be just in a reading or consumption mode, or if they should be able to do pretty much anything there, and of course levels in between. Also important, if you define connections to other systems, these are also bound to specific spaces. The same for models you create, meaning tables, views, certain flows, translation activities you might be running. These are all sitting within a particular space. But on top of it, you can also share them, meaning you can share tables and views you created, so the models you created, with other spaces. And if you want to illustrate this, you might have then certain spaces for finance, sales, HR, which all have similar, but maybe not all the same kind of connections to source systems, where you bring in maybe additional data from external systems, which are here depicted in the gray boxes underneath. And then you might have spaces which you spin up for certain projects or certain business users in certain areas who might want to do and build their own models on top of what you provide centrally from an IT-driven management of such a system, right? And then these can be connected via the sharing capabilities. That's what these arrows between the spaces on top should symbolize, right? So you can grant sharing of certain objects to certain other spaces, and the people there can consume it without copying it. Again, we can really have a read access between all of those kind of models. So that's very interesting. Okay, so now we talked about spaces, which is the central piece of a Datasphere system. Now let's have a look at another layer, right? So how do you connect to data? And I didn't put all the connectivity on for specific source systems on this one slide, but just the kind of connections you can create. And it starts with the built-in connectors, which we have. I think they are in the range of 40 at the moment, 40 different connectivities to various source systems, which we provide out of the box, where you can create direct connections. We also offer something which you see here in the middle named as Open Connectors. This is a service as part of the business transformation, business technology platform, BTP, which is called Open Connectors, provides a framework of APIs to, I think, around about 250, 300 different cloud-based systems, which you can also leverage to bring in or connect to external data sets. The data marketplace, a great idea and component as part of Datasphere for the exchange of data, either to acquire publicly available data. So we have, I think, 2,500 data products as part of the public marketplace available, which you can work with. But you can also work with this data marketplace within your company, so like an internal kind of marketplace where you, maybe working for the finance department, want to share data under certain restrictions with other groups within your company, maybe the sales department or marketing, right? And that way you can really, in a secure environment, create data products of the data you want to share to other organizational units. Or this could be also across different Datasphere tenants and working across companies. If you have your supplier network, maybe with whom you might want to share certain data sets and provide it to them, right? This can be really very dedicated sharing capabilities we offer there. And if you want to make now the context to Business Data Cloud, that's where you hear also the term data product quite a lot. This is where we take it to the next level, but we come to that in a moment. You see other boxes here on the bottom left, like BW Bridge, capability to bring in BW functionality, but also external tooling. So if you already have certain ETL or ELT based tooling, this can be connected via SQL interfaces and technical users to bring in also data or to provide data. We offer this to various different external systems based on these industry standard APIs like SQL and the likes. So bringing it now again in the context of Business Data Cloud, this box on the right, you see these data products being mentioned again, right? So we offer SAP managed data products as part of Business Data Cloud, but also the capability to create custom data products. And this is where the data marketplace and these custom data products come together, because this was pretty much the predecessor of these custom data products, because with the data marketplace and the data sharing cockpit in there, you already created your own custom built and specific data products, which can now be leveraged on the next level with BDC. You see Databricks and Snowflakes as other options here from partners who are also able to provide data via data products to Datasphere, and also these external connectivities via the BDC Connect interface for these brownfield scenarios for existing Datasphere, Snowflake. In the meantime, also Microsoft Fabric, we reached a partnership which will be delivered somewhere mid of next year, and also Google BigQuery is in the mix here for the BDC Connect setup. So pretty much covering all the big hyperscalers and players in this market in partnership relations with Business Data Cloud. Very, very interesting and important here. Good. Now once you have this connectivity established, right, there are multiple ways on how you can get access to that data sitting in these external systems. On the one hand side, we offer the concept of remote tables. So remote tables meaning basically you set up a remote table, which is more or less a metadata copy of your table in the source system, which gets all the different data types and the namings and everything there. But the data still sits in the external system, so in the source system, if you will. So you virtually access the data, you can model on top of it, you can build up your different KPIs and whatever you need to define in the modeling activity, still keep it kind of virtual access. So you don't need like an upfront data movement for that. And it's also supported across multiple different connectivities. But at a certain point in time, you might find maybe there's a performance impact if so many people query that kind of source system, and there might be an impact on the source system even with a lot of requests coming in. Then you have what you see next to it, and I indicated this with these back and forth arrows, right? So you can switch on table replication, remote table replication as we call it, and even schedule it for updates that you bring in, either snapshots or real-time replication. That depends a little bit on the capability of the source system, what you can do here, and enable this so that you mitigate then these performance impacts on the source systems. Or as an alternative, which is also possible on top of a virtual access, is what we call here view persistency, because typically on top of a remote table, you usually have additional layers of views where you define more on the semantic side, where you might want to bring in other data sets to mix it up, to join it, to union it with this data. And there you can also decide on each of those views to persist it for similar reasons, right? And you can also schedule that, of course, right? So you have certain flexibilities as part of these remote tables, but it's not the only way. We also offer cloud native data integration and have various toolings provided in that area. So traditional ELT, so extract, load, and transformation capability with replication flow and transformation flow. So replication flow basically brings in data into Datasphere, and then with the transformation flow capabilities, you have pretty rich capabilities to do transformations on top of the data set which you brought in. Or if you're looking at more traditional ETL, so extract, transform, and then load it into the target system, that's why we offer a capability which we call data flow for these batch loads, including transformations, etc. So bringing it all together in a bigger picture, right? So on the left-hand side here, you might have your source system or source systems you acquire data from, and then bring in replication flow technology where you can already apply certain filters and mappings and projections to store data into local tables, also with Delta capability support here. You can also do this the other way around. If you have data inside of Datasphere, you can provide that and write it into outbound targets using the same technology of replication flows. And as I mentioned before, we offer transformation capabilities with a feature we call transformation flow, which could sit in between, right? So you bring in data, you transform it, you store it, and you might want to move it outside into other systems there as well. And in order to orchestrate everything, all of these different steps, right, we provide a capability we call task chains, which is then orchestrating all the different steps in one sequence with different capabilities and notifications, etc., that you can really have an orchestration capability for all of this. So now we covered basically the data connectivity and the transformation capabilities. So let's have a look at the modeling capabilities. And I picked a few things here which we can look closer at. I talked a couple of times about views. So on top of tables or remote tables, you might have a variety of different views. So I picked the usual ones you would find. So a typical type of a view might be a fact view, meaning you have some attributes defining whatever kind of key figures and measures you have within that table. And you can define that with the semantic usage type, as we call it here in the system in Datasphere, of type fact. You can also model dimensions. You can model hierarchies, which you might know from your S/4HANA system. You can model text dimensions, meaning if you have a multinational business, right, you might have your product descriptions being stored in different languages, right? So not only in English, maybe in Spanish, in German, in French, in Japanese, wherever you do business usually, right? And you can, depending on the people who work with the data, then apply this with the different language settings as well there. So this is an area where you can either provide these views created in a graphical user interface, so in a drag and drop kind of environment, or for the professionals in the room here, you can also script that, meaning you can use SQL script as a language and write these views in a coding way. So providing both of these capabilities as part of the overall system. And then on top of it, you already saw the bigger box here, which we call analytic model, which is the core piece between the data itself and the analytics on top of it, right? That's where we really define this multidimensional and the rich analytical capabilities in the modeling layer. So we provide here a variety of capabilities to further define measures, to restrict measures and dimensions, to have variables and filters applied to it, and to be able to stack different models on top of each other, right? So this is a quite rich model piece which we have here, which also allows for external consumption to provide the data with an OData interface, so that you can not only work with SAP Analytics Cloud, like it's depicted in the image here on the right-hand side, but you can also use this OData interface to expose them through this kind of API to other tools. So summing it up, at certain point in time when you did some modeling activities, you might have used some or many of the different modeling editors and capabilities, which I try to put all of them into one slide, into one space here. So I talked about the transformation, replication, and data flows, as well as the task chains for the orchestration, right? We talked about tables, remote tables, local tables, and views. There are different capabilities I didn't talk about at the moment because it would go too deep for the short session which we have today, like intelligent lookups, additional interesting capabilities, and ER models. We talked about the different view capabilities and analytic models. And of course, I also did not talk about this, but very important, if you have data, right, you also want to restrict who can access what kind of data set and to what level of the data set, so which rows can be seen at the end. So row level security is what we call here data access controls, which can be applied to views or analytic models, which then in the end get exposed to analytical toolings like SAP Analytics Cloud. And of course, I briefly talked about the sharing capabilities. So when you have multiple spaces in your system, you can share artifacts between them. And this gives you a little bigger picture. So let's have a look at the time. So we have 20 minutes left. We definitely want to use some time for Q&A. So let me jump into the next section now directly, which is Datasphere in the context of Business Data Cloud. And that's where I already talked a lot about data products. So, but I didn't really talk about what exactly a data product is. And I summed it up with these 4 boxes here. On the one hand side, it's the data itself. So it could be data sitting in one table or in a set of tables, right? So the data itself. On the other hand, it's also the semantics, meaning the description. What I mean here with well described, that you have some metadata attached to it, where people can better understand what this data set is really about and how it's composed, what are the different meanings for different fields or key figures, etc. What you also need is an API, at least one, right, that you can consume it. Might be a SQL API, might be OData API, as we've seen for the analytic model, etc. Might be different accessibility. And of course, you need to find it, right? So you need to be able to discover the data products, meaning you need some sort of cataloging solution, which you then provide for your data product. And as you heard, the data products is not new concept at SAP with Business Data Cloud only. This came really out of Datasphere and is going into on the next level now with Business Data Cloud. And one of the big differences here is so far you managed data products within Datasphere only on your own. But now with Business Data Cloud, we provide from an SAP perspective standard data products or data products managed by SAP based on the different line of business solutions. In the May session on BDC, I went on this quite deeper. So I shorten it here a little bit, but based on these examples of what you see on the left-hand side, S4HANA Cloud, Private Edition, SuccessFactors, etc. We will, and we are already providing standard data products as part of them, which are exposed then to Business Data Cloud. And of course, we still provide you the opportunity to bring in your own custom-built data products, either via Datasphere and the marketplace capability, but also maybe from systems which are not part of your Business Data Cloud setup yet, or might be even third-party systems. And we will provide them in a way that the interface, so the consumability, is provided via another industry standard here, zero copy delta share is the API, where we provide these kind of data sets to various applications. Might be the intelligent applications I was talking about very early on, might be analytics or other mechanisms. So why is this important? Because these data products also really provide an important piece as part of our overall BDC setup with also these technology partners. Let's take Databricks as one example here. And what you see here in the middle between Datasphere and Databricks is the data catalog. This is really the metadata exchange which happens between these different systems. So whenever we want to share something with Databricks, in this example here, right, we use the cataloging solution and provide this zero copy delta share API and the data products I want to share to Databricks. And on the Databricks side, I can use the Databricks cataloging solution and get access to it, further work with the data. The data is not copied. I basically get a pointer to the data in the underlying object store. I can work with the data with my data scientists, for example. Usually in these projects, you create new insights, new data, and can bring it back in a similar way, that you define a data product now based on this new data you created on the Databricks side and connect it via the cataloging solution back into Datasphere. This will in the future be the same for Snowflake, for the SAP Snowflake, for example, and others of our partner solutions. So that's why this concept of data products is pretty central. So looking back at the time, we have 15 minutes left. So let me maybe focus on the outlook now. And if we look at Business Data Cloud overall and the different areas we are focusing on, is it on the one hand side, obviously the data products and intelligent applications we want to bring from an SAP perspective, right? So all of the different line of business solutions at SAP, they are currently creating data products and intelligent applications on top of Business Data Cloud, and this is only growing, right? So we prepare also the infrastructure for partner built data products in the future. That is something we have on our mind, so that our partner ecosystem can also jump in here, provide for their specific industry knowledge, for example, data products and applications. Another important part is to get all of this really in a scalable way. We will provide a capability which is currently planned for end of Q1 next year, which we call Data Product Studio. This will then be more or less the next evolutionary step of the data marketplace, data sharing cockpit, which you might know from Datasphere, where you define these data products, but also the SAP provided data products will be defined in the future there in this kind of central editing tool, which will become part of the Business Data Cloud cockpit. I talked about Snowflake and the connectivity to third-party data. We're working on extending these partnerships there, of course, right? BW and bringing more functionality in the area of data products together with BW systems is part of our strategy, as well as, of course, AI and generative AI. So we're currently working together specifically with Joule and Datasphere in an early adopter care program right now to start bringing Joule into Datasphere, but of course next year also into Business Data Cloud. We will enhance our capabilities on the knowledge graph area, and different agents are planned as part of Business Data Cloud for various areas, also in the development area here for the different development capabilities as part of BDC. Planning and analytics, of course, a very important part of Business Data Cloud, where we plan further innovation in the area of seamless planning, which is the close collaboration for planning models happening on top of Datasphere models, asymmetric reporting, another one, and further other things, as well as, of course, enterprise readiness, enhancing our data center availability, enhancing BDC Connect. I'd already talked about that we have, apart from Databricks and Snowflake, also other partnerships with Google and Microsoft. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we get more partnerships come 2026 during next year on this. So that was it from my side. Put also a few links here at the back of the presentation for further interest on the different areas of BDC. And with that, Larissa, I think we can open it up for Q&A.
All right. First of all, thank you, Klaus-Peter, for your insights on Datasphere. Thank you very much. And to all our participants, now is the moment to bring up your questions. I have one question in the chat, and the question is, does it use SAP SLT for the table replication, or is it something else?
Yeah, good question, because SLT, that's our technology on the on-premise world, which we use to exchange data between different systems, and it's not SLT, because here we use a cloud-based tooling, which is similar to SLT, I would say. We call it replication flow. So you heard or saw the term a couple of times on the different slides I was talking about, and this is the technology behind the scenes. So not only for Datasphere, but also for Business Data Cloud, of bringing data and providing access to different data sets.
All right, thank you for that. Maybe some of the participants are thinking of more questions. As I said, you can put them in the chat or via Q&A tool. And meanwhile, I have a question. As I saw on your last slide, this outlook also regarding AI capabilities. But my question is, what kind of AI capabilities are available already now? Can you give us a short,
Yes.
maybe
Yes.
overview?
You saw probably on this one, on the very first slides, there was this AI foundation box listed, right? So our AI capabilities with the AI foundation as part, as a central service, also as part of BTP, is part of Business Data Cloud. So that is already woven into it. What else we are leveraging is, of course, on top of it, implementations like Joule, or the different agents which we are planning on bringing as specialized agents for different parts of BDC, right? So we're currently defining what kind of agents we will bring out next year. So I cannot tell you exactly what will come when. That's currently in discussion, but we definitely want to provide the help of AI, also Gen AI, as part on different levels of Business Data Cloud, but also Datasphere. If you think about modeling activities, when you are building views on tables with hundreds of fields, right? Defining all the semantics yourself is probably a little tedious task, because you then have to go through all the hundreds of fields, right? And make the settings yourself. If you have the magic Gen AI button who gives you already a suggestion, so which is probably a 95% guess at the end, because there's always some deviations, as we know, working with AI. But then you can check it, right? And you don't have to do it all manually yourself, or creating code based. If you want to write code for transformations in Python, etc., you can tell the system what kind of code you need to have created, and then it creates it for you, right? Instead of writing the code manually yourself and then running into all of the different issues typically which happens with writing code, right? With typos and whatever happens accidentally. So these kind of areas helping developers become more productive in Datasphere, but also overall with BDC. This is, of course, something we plan, and of course, integrating the existing AI capabilities at SAP with Joule and the specific agents that they can talk to each other, etc. So this is something which we have on our bigger vision map.
All right, thank you for that. And it sounds very promising, as It's always better to have some predefined content and not just receive some empty box and try to customize everything from scratch. All right. So I can't see more questions in the chat. And we are almost at the end of the session. As I've already mentioned, the materials of this session, the PDF will be included into the description of the video that we will upload on the playlist on the SAP community. And so all materials will be publicly available, and we can only encourage you to leverage these materials, to share them, to spread the word. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us or probably to Klaus-Peter directly, because he's the expert for this topic. And yes, with this, I suggest to close this session. Again, thanks, Klaus-Peter, and to the
You're welcome.
audience. There will be one more session this year to next week. We will talk about data in context of Clean Core, and then we will close the webcasts, move to clouderp webcast for this year. With this, thank you very much. We will be happy to welcome you next week, and then we stay in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.